Okay, so as promised, the next Fishy Business tank tip video is based on the nitrogen cycle, and there is a lot of detail I can go into about the nitrogen cycle, but all I want to really talk about today is how that applies to you, the common aquarist, and what happens, what the process is for setting up a fish tank. First off, the nitrogen cycle is the very basis and beginning of how an aquarium begins. Nothing happens without the nitrogen cycle, and the importance of knowing what happens will kind of set you up for the future as far as your tank is concerned. It is the most commonly not talked about thing when most of our customers go start their tank off somewhere else, or they don't know very much about it, and it's something that we have to explain over and over again every single day. So I'm going to do a very basic interpretation of it with you today, and let's begin with what the nitrogen cycle is and how it works. So the nitrogen cycle, we have our handy dandy little graph that you had when you were in school. And so what happens typically and how this process gets started, at least from a verbal standpoint, is you come in the store and you're having problems with your aquarium, and we listen to those problems and ask questions. And based on those answers that you give us, we try to determine what to test for first and what direction to go with the water. Typically, if it's not a situation where the tank has been set up for a long time with fish in it, and that's a big thing, then we immediately zero in on ammonia or nitrite, and I'll explain what that kind of is. The first thing that I want to explain is what a new aquarium is. If you've had an aquarium sitting outside in the garage or in the basement for 10 years and you set it up, to us that's a new aquarium. If it's an aquarium that's been set up running for a month but no fish have been introduced or any ammonia has been introduced, that's a new aquarium too. If you just bought it yesterday, filled it up with water, and you're back with a water sample, that's a new aquarium. So there are a lot of definitions for what a new aquarium is and isn't. Basically, a new aquarium starts when the first fish and or bacteria and ammonia appears in an aquarium. So the first thing we have, we're going to just start off with A. That's the ammonia. And when the fish is introduced into the aquarium is when the first bit of bacteria will begin. The ammonia level is here, and what happens is the ammonia level slowly rises. Then what we have is nitrosomonas bacteria that comes in and breaks that ammonia down. So the ammonia will typically only get so high in an aquarium until it drops again and starts heading down. As this process happens, then we have nitrite that appears. The nitrite then begins and goes up, and then we have what's called a nitrobacter that pulls that down and creates nitrate out of nitrite. This whole process typically takes about 4 weeks in a freshwater aquarium. The way it works is that you come in, assuming that you have no fish in the tank or no fish has been introduced. And we start with extremely hardy fish that can handle the deadly levels that are up in here of your ammonia and your nitrite. Those fish are then introduced, ammonia forms, the bacteria starts, and this process from beginning to end is called the nitrogen cycle. Now the nitrogen cycle doesn't end when nitrite gets to the very end or at zero, because that incidentally is zero. Then what we have is the byproduct of nitrite, which is nitrate, and that is never ending, and we'll talk about that in just 1 second. The main thing for you to understand is in this process, it is very dangerous to put scaleless fish in the tank. It is very dangerous to put any kind of fish that isn't extremely hardy. And any fish can succumb to the nitrogen cycle in the beginning. So typically, if it's freshwater or saltwater, we're going to start out with very, very hardy fish, few in number, and we're going to feed them fairly sparingly this whole time so that you don't end up with major problems. Again, the nitrogen cycle in a freshwater tank typically takes about 4 weeks. In a saltwater tank, depending on how it's set up, it can take as long as 6 to 8 weeks. However, if live rock is used, if clean bacteria is seeded into the tank, it can happen in a matter of days. So that really depends on how you do the tank and who you talk to when you come in the store and how we handle your new aquarium. Now what happens after the nitrogen cycle is over with, after that 4-week period where you have not added any fish except in the very beginning, You will come in, bring a water sample and or test it yourself, and then we will go on to the next stage, which you get the green light to start adding fish. Typically, the nitrogen cycle will not happen again in your aquarium unless a major change is brought on in the tank. So from this point on, you're free to put fish at will in your tank forever and ever, amen, until the tank gets, tapped out, I guess you could say. However, things that can happen to cause the nitrogen cycle to reappear would be you letting that aquarium go for a very, very long time without cleaning it. Then all of a sudden you decide, there's a bunch of food and waste on the bottom. I think I'm going to do a 50% water change. Well, if you do a 50% water change, there is a pretty good chance you are going to end up going back through the nitrogen cycle, in which case you are dealing with a brand new aquarium situation again. That is one of the things that can happen to start the nitrogen cycle. Also, if for any reason the tank would be down for a length of time and all the bacteria was to die for some reason, that could also cause the nitrogen cycle to begin again. Now, assuming that the nitrogen cycle has completed itself and the ongoing fish care, let's talk about how the nitrogen cycle works in with water changes. Because, like I was talking about, you now have NO3, which is your nitrate. And at the end of this nitrogen cycle, while ammonia and nitrite technically should not go back up again, you will have nitrate that begins. And when you do your water changes, that knocks the nitrate down. But in a situation where you let your water changes go for a long period, that nitrate, or the byproduct of nitrite, keeps climbing, and then you do a water change and it knocks it down, but as you notice, it doesn't knock it back down to zero. That is a very important thing and why water changes need to be done on a regular basis. Now, you don't need heavy water changes. 10 to 15%, 25% in a if you're letting it go a whole month, should bring your water back into line. However, if you let it go for months on end or weeks on end, that nitrate is going to keep climbing. And what happens over a long period of time is it gets so high that a simple water change or multiple water changes won't bring it back down to zero, which is where you ideally want that. So that's the importance of water changes. That's the importance of the nitrogen cycle and how it applies to your aquarium. I know this is a fairly boring video, but it is the most important thing for you to know as an aquarist, and the most important way and reason for how to add fish, what needs to be done in the very beginning, and what you need to know. The importance of testing water quality, the importance of water changes, and the importance of just knowing kind of where your aquarium is at the beginning. So I hope this little tank tip on the nitrogen cycle has helped. If you got any questions, just throw them my way. I'll be happy to answer them.